Retired professor of ophthalmology, Dr. Richard Hill, describes his very first visit to Armenia over 10 years ago and the subsequent impact the project has made to the war-torn country.
When we first arrived in Armenia, there was no running water, there was electricity for 1 hour per day, there was no heat. We had frost, literally had frost on your blankets in your bed. In the middle of the night, Roger jumped up and he said, "Tak shur," and I thought that meant air raid, run for cover, because everyone was running. I learned very quickly what tak shur meant was hot water. So this was the 1 hour per day that you had hot water. It happened to be in the middle of the night at like 2 o'clock in the morning.
Dr. Hill describes how conditions have improved in Armenia.
About 2 years ago, I went and I checked into a nice hotel. I turned the light switch on, the lights went on, and I just stood there looking at the room. And I realized it was warm, the lights were on, and I went over to the faucet and I turned the water on, and not only was it not brown, it was hot and cold. And I was stunned, and the person I was traveling with said, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "You don't understand." I said, "The lights go on and there's hot and cold running water." He said, "Well, yeah." I said, "It wasn't always like that." In the beginning, the patients, a lot of them were trauma patients from the war, and we saw the most horrific trauma patients. There was one patient we call Rocket Man, and the story goes that he was coming over a trench, and the rocket-propelled grenade went right in his eye, and he grabbed it, pulled it out, and threw it on the troops and blew them up. And I'm thinking, this is total BS. And they said, "But he's here." "Well, yeah? Let me see him." We go and we see this gentleman, middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning, flashlights, and he has a 40-millimeter hole in his head where his eye used to be. And I had to look. I picked up his hand, turned it over. He had third-degree burns on his hand. I thought, my God, this really happened. And the plastic surgeon we were with he didn't know what to do. And I said, "Well, why don't you just break down the exposed bone and put a skin graft over it?" The cases were desperate, the resources were few, and we really learned to improvise, and we learned to develop a basis for the program that's led to its success.
Dr. Hill goes out on a limb for one patient.
The EyeCare Project has allowed us to do things that normally you couldn't do. So the one story I'll share with you is the time that I broke the law in Armenia. And there was a woman who was 45 years old, and she was blind in both eyes from cataracts. And what we did for her is, the rules were you could only have cataract surgery on one eye, so one eye was supposed to stay blind. So in the middle of the case, what I did is I pulled the drapes over to the other eye. We operated on the other eye, we patched both eyes, and to sneak past the observers, we told them that the other eye was scratched, so we patched it too. The next morning, when we opened the patches and she saw from both eyes, she was just crying, and everyone was happy. And that's happened a number of times. We did the right thing, and she can see, and I can still see her face to this day. But that joy has been repeated with a number of patients. I can probably think of a dozen patients that were like that. There was absolutely no hope, and all of a sudden there was hope. And that's really cool.